3A3 for legal advice with the attorney of the public body, Regional Transportation Authority, here at this address. Following the executive session, TMC may take action to provide recommendations to the RTA board. So before we entertain a motion for that, there is only TMC members are allowed to be in the executive session. I think we had some folks last time, and the staff, the appropriate staff. So if you're a TMC member that's been designated as someone on the TMC, then you're able to attend the TMC or the executive session. So with that, I'd entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
A motion and a second. Discussion. Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Tim, Jeff, how did we get them on the phone?
We'll get you. We have call-in information.
Excellent. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. Okay, if I call back into session?
Yes, sir, please do.
Thank you, Tim. So we are now back in session. I don't believe there's any recommendation at this point from the group out of executive session. So unless anyone disagrees with that, we'll move on. Okay, we will move on to item 3, which is RTA next. So Rick has been working on a variety of things since we last met last week. Sounds longer than just yesterday, right? Which is really Friday. So Rick, if you want to go ahead and share your ideas, your thoughts, and this is about the smoothing. So trying to look at what projects we might look at extending or based on what Rick's experience. And I don't think, Rick, you've had the opportunity to really call a lot of folks and talk to them at this point. It's just some ideas. So please receive that with the spirit in which it's given.
Perfect intro, Mike. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. So what you see coming around for a handout, Issa, if you can just bring up the Word document handout on the screen. Did it make it around to everybody? Thanks, James. In an interest to try and keep this to one page for once and a little bit simpler than what we've been handing out all along, this is a simple period summary 1 through 4 of kind of what projects are in there, including the current RTA projects as well as what would be fired up based on the phasing plan that we've been operating under. So taking all the periods in there, not necessarily getting into the granular detail of when they'll start, what the cash flow is going to be, but wanted to show you what it would all look like. And these are the type of project loads that we'd have going on, primarily focused on the roadway element. And there were a couple of things that jumped out to me that I highlighted that I thought I would throw out there to prompt any kind of follow-up discussion on this. So highlighted on there, the Cortero, SR 210, and Tangerine projects. So those are all highlighted with the interest or with the thought on there. Would it make any sense to possibly consider a period shift on each of those? So each one would move back a period essentially, then allowing the better ability or capability to collect the non-RTA funding that we refer to as the RAC funds, which is the Resource Allocation Advisory Committee that assigns the money to the region from ADOT or from the state. So that's simply one suggestion on there, is it buys a little bit more time, because you've seen on the previous spreadsheets that we've handed out, there's a chunk of change with those updated cost estimates on there for those particular projects. Second item on there that's highlighted are the Harrison projects. There's the Harrison Bridge that is part of the current plan, which is just a 2-lane bridge over the Pantano. But then there's also the 4-lane widening project that the city had identified and brought to the table, and that's been in there as well. So you can see the proximity between the two periods in there, of period 1, period 2, recognizing there's a little time frame separation between those two, but was identifying that. And Sam, I think it was you that made a comment a while back, or maybe it was just something we were talking about. Did it make sense to possibly combine? That stuck with me, so I wanted to take the time to propose that, share that out here and say, is there a possibility that makes sense? Could we get some benefit out of that? And then the last one on there, I highlighted all the Drexel projects that are identified. And as you see, we have several of them spread across periods 1, 2, and 3. One of them right now that I didn't highlight is right above the bottom one in the first period. It's from Midvale to Calle Santa Cruz. That's an ongoing project right now where they're doing design and have other funding sources already associated with that. But the rest of these, would it make sense then to combine them? Maybe do it as a full corridor program, starting the design right away and utility work in period 2, and then looking to go to construction with period 3. So that's a possibility on that. Would that buy it a little bit more stretching out? Would that get it a more corridor philosophy of implementing in one shot, but getting to do all the advanced work up front? So those were just some thoughts as I was kind of staring at this following last Friday's discussion that I thought would be a good way to prompt it. Shane had asked for, could we see what that would possibly look like? So those are the ones that jumped out, grabbed me, that I wanted to throw out there. With that, Mike, that was the short little sweet spiel I wanted to give, and turn it back to you for any discussion, or I can answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Rick? So I've got a couple of comments. We ended the conversation last time with SR 210, and I know that Carmine, you all were going to look at it. Have you had time? I know it was just literally yesterday, but I mean, did you have an opportunity to look at that at all?
Yeah, Mike. So the team went ahead and took a look at that. And so when we met on Friday, there was some discussion about, the importance of SR 210 relative to Sonoran Corridor. And I commented that I thought that was secondary to some of the other benefits of SR 210. And so our transportation director reached out to Rod Lane, who is, the former ADOT representative, and had some conversation around that. And so one of the points that Rod made is that given that I-10 through downtown is constrained, right, you can't easily expand it to deal with future capacity needs, that SR 210 could play a role in potentially relieving some of that demand. And so, again, I think that this is one that, as a region, we have to decide what's the relative importance and prioritization of SR 210. So I think that the idea with Sonoran Corridor is that you would come down Alvernon, right, to make that connection, right, from SR 210 down to Sonoran Corridor. But I don't see that as being the driving consideration of it. I believe that there are other factors that led us to prioritize those in the RTA next draft plan. And so would certainly be interested in Jeremy's thoughts on it, or anyone else, Sam, from the city. We can have more conversation.
Yeah, so, we went back and we looked at that DCR, and, based on the traffic studies and engineering that went into that DCR, basically what they were trying to do is take everybody on that south kind of east side quadrant and get those folks to direct downtown. Because based on what the traffic studies were showing everyone in that DCR was that there was a lot more traffic clogging up the arterial streets going through the city to get to downtown. And so based on discussions when that DCR was put together, was they were trying to figure out a way how to get traffic off of I-10 and not having to go through the arterial streets and get them to that direct connection, which was downtown. And so we went back and I looked at that Sonoran Corridor, and in that 1,000-page plus document, Sonoran Corridor was only mentioned one time. And it was basically just for the DCR team, anytime there was a project that was taken out of it for construction and design, was to go back and talk to the Sonoran Corridor team to make sure that, there was some coordination. But other than that, there was no connection between that DCR and Sonoran Corridor.
Good.
So essentially, it was just to get traffic from that southeast corner or quadrant to the downtown area of Tucson.
Sam or Christina?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. A few thoughts on this. One thing I want to mention, we've not had a detailed conversation with the mayor and council about this project in particular. I think some of the earlier conversations we had about this project, that the city was rather agnostic on whether or not it moved forward. The last thing I'll just mention is there are probably other higher priority ADOT needs that the city has besides SR 210. I haven't identified those, but I'm guessing there's some other interchanges we'd like to see done first.
John?
Jeremy, quick question. I think last week you mentioned something about the long-term future of I-10 in the southeast is 10 lanes.
Correct. So if you look at
That jive with needing to bleed off the State Route 210 traffic.
right, so if you look, when you look through the DCR, we essentially have to go from, you got Keno to Country Club going on right now. And then you would take, once you get to Country Club in Alvernon area, then you would take it out to Valencia. When you get to that stretch, it's 5 lanes in each direction. So it's a 10-lane section. And a lot of that, a majority of that was driven off of the traffic interchange and system interchange that you're going to have at SR 210. The influx of traffic going in and out of at that junction.
So going back to the conversation we had Friday, Terry had a pretty good observation. It's over $1 billion of investment over the life of that project. And is that something that we would want to recommend as the investment is where, we would put the regional ADOT dollars over the course of this at least the plan. And my gut is there's probably a lot of other needs as well. My request, I think, Jeremy, would be what other needs are out there that we should be paying attention to? How do we make a decision about, I mean, $1 billion is a lot of money, right? But how do we compare that to other needs within the region that we might want to consider before we go off and spend $1 billion on that SR 210?
Sure. I mean, based on, what we see just on the operational standpoint and from what we hear and feedback we get from, different public meetings, especially when we were out for Keynote Country Club, is trying to go from, again, Alvarado to Valencia and then fall back and hit that Park Avenue and 6th Avenue area around that I-19 bend, and then fall back on I-19. Once we get Irvington and I-19 is now on the books for construction in March. So when that's done around 28, fall back, and then you get that I-19 widening from I-10, I-19 all the way out to Valencia. So from what we've heard from feedback from the community is those are high priorities as well.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is the SR 210 may not be as high a priority at this point. Is that what I'm hearing? I'm not trying to put words. I just want to understand because that might help inform the conversation here.
Right. I mean, we don't want to be the ones to say whether it's a priority or not, or whether to take it on or off. I think the ask was that originally was we went and adjusted the costs, and we took a look at what other needs are within the region. But I think based on that information, I think we as a committee and as a group need to make that decision on whether or not it's a priority or not, because there's benefits to both. So, I mean, I think we need to collectively make that decision. We don't want to influence.
I guess we're trying to make that
Sure.
decision, but we'd like some guidance in terms of the needs. So maybe it's not. So I see Tim's got his hand up, and then we'll come to Terry. Go ahead, Tim.
Thanks, Mike. I was still chewing. I'm so used to not seeing my hand being seen.
It's because Jan's not here.
Here, a question, and I don't know the answer to this one. I think part of the reason SR 210 made it this far is because of the leverage investment from the state. And my question would be, if it's not SR 210, does that risk our region not getting that investment from the state? In other words, if we collectively said we would prioritize some other investment, are we at risk of those funds going to Maricopa or some other area? I don't know the answer to that.
Jeremy?
No, I mean, if that was to play out that way and SR 210 fell off the map, ultimately what happened is when we get into those later fiscal years, whatever funds come through the RAC and then through the region, they would just be obligated somewhere else on other ADOT projects. Correct.
Got it. Terry?
Thanks, Mike. So, I did bring up the SR 210, and I think that Jeremy's right. It is a collective decision of this group, more importantly, the board, to decide whether or not it's an important corridor. I think it is an important corridor. The question is, again, I'll go back to it, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is $1.1 billion worth of state money worth it when we're looking at all of the other needs that we have? I think the county and the city would need to weigh in very heavily on that. I think my position would be I would defer to those jurisdictions that are most affected by it. But to me, just from, a 30,000 foot level view, it doesn't seem like a great investment of monies.
Okay. Any other comments on that? So Tim, you and your team, and Carmine, you and Jan, if you could come back to us with some thoughts on that. My gut is that as long as those dollars stay, within the jurisdictions, that it's really up to you all to think through that. That might be an opportunity, though. Let's go back to the list that Rick went over and really kind of talk through. Just, we don't have to get into the details right this second, but just talking through what this could look like to move some projects to different periods and quite frankly, potentially move them back into the program a little farther than what they were originally, and just spreading them out. Any heartburn in the way that this is outlined? Terry, Joe. So go ahead, Terry.
So I don't think I have any issues whatsoever with the Cortero suggestion. I'm not so sure about the tangerine, quite frankly. That pushes that out pretty far, and I'm concerned that we'll run into the same situation that we're currently in with Cortero right now if we wait that long, where the land is bought up, we don't have the right of way, and that project becomes as expensive as Cortero if we wait that long. So that would be my only concern with Tangerine. Cortero, as I mentioned last time, I think there's a lot of room for discussion and looking at various options on that. So I think it does make sense. Our team is looking at some of those numbers relative to INA, more interchange, Cortero, and it should have more detail for our Wednesday meeting, provided that we have one.
Thanks, Terry. You know that I mentioned maybe the RTA taking a more active role in right-of-way acquisition. And as I think through some of these projects, if we know we're going to be acquiring property, you know, maybe we should be thinking about that in the first period. So we're buying as many of these parcels as we possibly can, as opposed to waiting until they're scheduled or until they're budgeted. I think it could be just like that country song says, you know, buy land and go out and buy the land, because it's not going to get any cheaper, is my gut on that. So, hey, Tim, you got your hand up. Do you have it up again, or?
Well, I was just gonna do the classic great minds, because I put it up to say that very same thing. I don't see I see a tremendous advantage in buying early whenever we
Yep.
can. And I know that runs the risk of buying things we don't need. But I think in the long run, if you end up slightly overbuying 20 years early, and then you flip it back into the market, you're money ahead every time.
Yep. I'm gonna think through that on these projects where we expect to have the right-of-way needs adding widths, et cetera, or the interchanges. I mean, those interchanges are pretty significant. We should be thinking about that now and really developing strategies for that now. I think that would be good money. Even if there's a right-of-way project, if you will, in the first period that feeds in the rest of these. I think there's value there. Tim or Christina or Sam, any comments on Harrison or Drexel? There was some commentary on that. You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Harrison Bridge and Harrison 4-lane do kind of go together. The only concern I'll share there is right now Harrison Road is at grade with the Pantano, and it's regularly closed due to flooding. I think that in the conversations we've had with the community out there, as well as the Ward 4 council member, that project would be a priority to move ahead of the 4-lane widening, just understanding that the need today is there. That's my only comment.
So Sam, maybe you could walk us through. So your preference is to separate those out and do the bridge first because of that at-grade crossing? I'm just trying to understand your thinking, that's all.
No, thanks, Mike, for the question. I mean, I think in a perfect world, the preference would be to do the entire project at once. I just believe, we've already made some commitments to build a bridge on Harrison at the Pantano, and that's the expectation that the community has right now for that. So I think it would be hard to go back on that commitment to delay it, especially to 2031 or later, to build the whole thing, because we're talking about 6, 7, 8, possibly even 10 years before they would see any investment on Harrison Road at the Pantano.
So you're thinking potentially, I'll use the term move it up, combine it and move it up?
Oh, that would be ideal. I think
Can
the
you move
challenge
anything
there.
else? Can you move anything else that's there back? I mean, so in other words, if we swapped it,
Yeah.
I understand what you're suggesting, but maybe there's something else. The one that I'm curious about, because it's a big outlay, is the 22nd Street Bridge. You see that on schedule?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't mean to pick a scab there.
Yeah,
I was
see it
part
on
of
here.
that. I was part of that. No, but I'm just, the reason I'm asking is that's a big outlay. And are you thinking that, or the 22nd Street West? That is period one, or that is RTA one, but I'm just asking.
Yeah. I don't have an answer for you on the bridge right now.
Okay.
I think 22nd Street West there, we'd have to talk about that. There's a lot
Okay.
of challenges associated with delivering that segment of the corridor. So potentially, and there could potentially be right away associated with that one. And the other thing I just want to mention too, we'd have to take a look at these Drexels and see how they line up as well. There may be some opportunities
Okay.
there.
We're just really looking at the smoothing. That's all. We're just trying to figure out how to reduce the magnitude in the first period. And I'm a little nervous about 22nd Street West coming off only because that's in RTA one, and I don't want to get into a conversation around that. However, what maybe if that, I know that's a pretty complex project, maybe we fund it partially in period one to start right-of-way acquisition design and then get into construction, maybe period two. Go ahead, John.
Like, Sam, how about Houghton segment 8? I mean, that one, if I recall correctly, was a bit controversial in the first RTA anyway as to who was going to pay for it, number one. But is it justified? You know, I think that's the northern link. I don't know what the latest is on that.
Yeah, great question, John. So we've actually done a feasibility study on that segment, and that's would be one of the scope changes we have. If you recall, it was in the projects allocated to RTA Next, and we were going to seek a scope change because you're right, there's two bridges on that stretch of Houghton. And what we found is that it doesn't need to be completely widened. In fact, really all that's needed on that segment of Houghton is some intersection improvements at both Speedway and especially Tanker Verde. I would argue that it is needed today. And so we're a little bit behind the 8 ball in getting those improvements done.
Okay. What about period two? Those are, other than the Cortero and SR 210, that's the Drexel and the Harrison again. So you see anything there?
Yeah, Mike, I want to analyze those Drexel projects. I think potentially we could smooth those out across the entire plan.
Okay.
Let me talk with our folks and we can get you an answer.
All right. And then Terry, on the Tangerine, maybe what we do on that is we look at the right-of-way acquisition piece of that for sure. And that's going to be a big chunk in not only time, but also in dollars. Maybe we can smooth that out a little bit. Okay. All right. Anything else, Rick?
No, that's got it. Thank you for the
I think
discussion.
it's clear as mud, right?
Absolutely. Art and
Okay.
science.
So Tim, in fairness, I have not had an opportunity to look at your request. What I have translated into about $125 million. I do have a thought there that I'm going to explore. Part of it is to potentially use some regional money annually. But what I'm coming up with is that maybe what we look at is setting the targets for the TPT. And if it comes in greater than that, then we don't use the regional money for that particular. Oh, there I can see Tim now. We don't use the regional money for that particular year. And I'm thinking a small amount out of TPT, maybe 5 million. That would get us to about 50. And then I'll look at some other, I've got a couple of little things that I'm thinking about. And what I'm starting to hone in on is we analyze the revenues annually. And so we make a decision annually on that. You know, potentially dangerous as long as we don't get reckless on that. If we have a really great year, we want to make sure we don't paint ourselves in a corner in the future. But that's kind of where I'm headed at this point. I've asked the team to scrub the numbers again. We're going to go through them and see what else we can squeeze out. Okay.
That sounds good. And yeah, I like your idea of having a primary and a backup plan, but if the revenues come in, you can back off the regional dollars. That makes sense.
Okay. All right. So on RTA Next, we're really honing in on something I think that looks like we can at least, I'm going to say, make a recommendation to the board, hopefully in the not too distant future. Tim, I know I've still got to get back to you on that. I'll come up with something for you. Is there anything else on the RTA Next plan that we've been talking about that causes you all grief? I know, Terry, you just mentioned that you still want to do some tweaks on your end on a couple things, but it's within the confines of your projects, if you will.
Yeah, Mike, I think the only thing that wouldn't be is probably the Moore Road interchange.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, that is certainly more than a tweak, I would
Are
say.
you gonna need more money then?
I don't believe so. I think
Okay.
that, you know, my discussions with staff, looking at INA, looking at the savings from Cortero, it puts us in a position to be able to do more and probably do more road interchange and still have money to put back into the kitty. So
Okay. That would really be helpful. 125 would be great. When do you think you'll know?
for Tim, I would do just about anything.
I know you would. You guys are amazing. The love in here is amazing. So when do you think you'll know on that?
So staff's working on it. They felt like they would have some solid numbers
Wednesday?
some rough numbers for us on Wednesday.
Okay, so you'll have something potentially to present on Wednesday. Okay. Is there anything else that's out there for RTA Next that we would need to kind of talk through? What I'm trying to get to is, are we to a point where we can make a recommendation? Now, we need to resolve SR 210, right? We need to figure that out. My gut on that is if after looking at it, the city team and the county team, if after looking at it with Jeremy and his group, the recommendation comes back that we should at least not do that now, right this minute. I don't think it minimizes the priority. I think it's still a priority, but we could potentially use those dollars for other purposes, other region, I'll call it priorities. Then you please come back with however you would use those dollars within your realm. And my gut would be, I don't know that you would add a project, but you could add it to, pavement rehabilitation or something, maybe transit. I don't know. Those are conversations you all can have. Okay. Anything else on RTA Next that's out there that we need to be talking about?
Hey, Mike, this is where I insert the joke of where we are also gonna fix that voting issue on the board. That's where the city gets all the votes. Or is that for RTA Next part 2?
So a year and 30 days ago, I would have agreed with you. Not anymore. Amazing how that works, right?
We'll just table that one for now.
We'll table that one. We'll table that one for a year and a half from now. That's a great idea. Curtis?
Yeah, Mike, I just wanted to kind of close out the discussion of a set aside for debt service. And I
Okay.
think we kind of zeroed that out, or what we have it
It's
at?
at 5 million.
5 million.
Mhm.
So that 5 million roughly would buy us a $20 million project, something like that. Since our last meeting, I kind of looked at the RTA 1 history with bonding, and I think the total was 370 million was bonded, and there were, according to Rob Samuelson, 3 separate issues, two at 150 million and one at 70 million. So 370 million in principal and another 100 million for the debt service itself. So it was almost $500 million roughly of what did we get, 1.4 billion total. So the bonding was really a significant nut in that last program, and I'm certainly in favor of not having a big set aside for debt service if we don't need it. And it's just a matter of, getting the priorities set up so we can pay go on the projects to the extent possible. And I would even suggest that if there is a need for a project to require bonding, to somehow integrate that into the project cost itself rather than having a set aside. So that would kind of compel the agencies to really look closely at the scheduling of projects to avoid debt service. Thanks.
Thank you, Curtis. I noticed Jan just joined us. Jan, I wanted to be the first one to say thank you for joining us. Carmine has single-handedly solved Tim's problems with the money And so all of the county money now goes to the
Yeah,
city.
yeah.
Thank you for that.
If
We
I,
really
if I
appreciate
could
it.
just mention, yeah, I did start logging in quickly, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. It's good to see you, Jan. I'm glad you're on. And I was just kidding. He didn't do that. So Curtis, thank you for your analysis of that. I think that's really what I'm going to recommend to the board based on what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing. I think that should there be a conversation about debt service in the fifth or sixth year, I don't see it happening before that, in my opinion, because we've got so many, I'll call them catch-up projects to complete RTA 1 and the rescoped, hopefully, that we're going to have plenty of work to do. I don't know that we'll need to be bonding additional. But if there is a project or projects that need to be bonded or that the agencies want to bond, that should be a function of those projects. And that conversation, I think, can happen at that time. But again, I don't see that happening for, probably 5 to 7 years is my gut at this point. So thank you. Okay, anything else on RTA next? Okay, let's move on to, I am going to ask that that we reconvene on Wednesday morning. And my ask at that point will be that we make a recommendation to the board with an RTA next plan that we're comfortable with. Hopefully we resolve some of these issues that we've just talked about, and we'll bring those back, and hopefully we'll have a recommendation to the board. Okay. Let's move to completion of the current plan. This will be kind of a short conversation. I presented to you last time a thought about potentially going to the voter or identifying we'll call it an interim step, an intermediate step. That step would include a rescoping of projects that are in RTA 1. So it's those 4 projects, potentially 5, by the way. North First Avenue that's in the city, we may choose to take that as one of the rescope projects because it was listed as a 6-lane section, and there is an opinion that was issued some time ago that said we should have rescoped that. But that decision was already made by the board, so we'll talk to the board and ask them about that. So Tim and team, just know that that's running around in my head. Then, or in addition to that, funding of transit, and that would continue at the same level. And then the third would be pavement rehabilitation. The attorney has opined we don't need to identify the corridor specifics, so it would be a pot of dollars. I did give you 2 scenarios last time. One was based on population, one was based on HERF. I don't know that we need to finalize those right this second. I want to discuss this with the board. And if the board gives me the nod to move forward with that, then I'll bring it back to you and we can talk through what those distributions could look like. But that would be for the pavement rehabilitation component of that. Terry?
So I understand that we wouldn't have to identify corridors for pavement rehabilitation. I'm just wondering if it's sexier to the voters if you do, right? If you say, hey, this roadway that everybody complains about is going to be redone, does that get a lot more people going, okay, I'll vote for that? So it may not matter, but I'm just wondering.
Great point, Terry. I think if we know for sure which corridors, I think that's fine. I think there's an opportunity, but I also think that there's probably some flexibility over the life of the program that we may want to consider that opportunity. But Tim, I see your hand, and then Bill.
Very similar comment. I think there's probably some commitments that could be made to Terry's point. And then maybe it's the first 3 years of a 10-year, whatever, come out with certainty early on, and then criteria by which the other monies in the future would be allocated.
Barry said that anything you say, Tim, it's a great idea.
We are simpatico today.
Bill.
My comment was essentially the same. I'm all about the sexy. Let's get people out and be excited about voting. But I don't think that means we have to list every roadway maintenance
Yeah.
project. Let's identify 5 or 6 in different jurisdictions where people can say, yes, I think I want to vote for this.
Okay, so that's the plan then, and what I'll have for you on Wednesday is an articulated or written down plan for that, having those three components to it. And I would look for this group to make a recommendation to the board. And then we'll talk with the board on Thursday. Any other comments or questions on completion of RTA 1 and how it relates, Bill?
This has probably been discussed in one of the earlier meetings, but I'm old and I forget. Has there been a rough amount of how much money would be available for maintenance out of the addendum if we were to move forward?
So we're not calling it maintenance, we're calling it pavement rehabilitation.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's as bad as saying burn, burn rate. So yes and no, we're still looking at the numbers. It will be in the vicinity of between 50 and 57 million a year is what we're thinking, but it could be a little more than that as well. We've got some scenarios that might bring it up a little bit more than that. So we're still scrubbing some numbers, but it could be as high as 50 plus. Okay. Anything else on RTA 1 completion? Okay. Jan, would you like to adjourn us or Tim?
Go ahead, Jan.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all. We'll see you then on Wednesday morning, same time, same place, same channel. Thank you all for your time. We really appreciate it. 8:30. We'll be at 8:30 and we'll have some munchies for y'all. Thank you all.
Thanks.